All right, James, you want to kick us off here?
Yes. Again, thank you all for joining. We're excited to share this conversation on a very important and relative topic, navigating AI security and risk through today's AI specific compliance frameworks. I'm Dr. James Sayles, and I have been in the industry for more than two decades, and I have a strong passion for AI strategy and also AI governance, and to where I basically wrote the book on AI governance and model risk management. And so I've worked with hyperscalers like IBM, Microsoft, Lenovo, and others, and have worked with energy companies such as Halliburton and others in scaling and managing their AI infrastructure. I have about 25 years in cybersecurity as well, and also have about the same amount of time into GRC. I am a certified CISO, certified AI strategist, and AI governance professional, and also a GRC fellow. So let's get deep into our presentation today. Again, thank you again. So if you look at AI and as it's moving from experimentation into execution, it's raising the stakes for compliance, for governance, cybersecurity, and board accountability. Organizations must now prove that their AI systems, their models, their agents are controlled, secured, monitored, they are relevant to the business, and aligned with regulators, with customers, with auditors, and their board expectations. So in this session, we will examine the 2026 AI compliance landscape, including ISO 42001, HITRUST AI, NIST AI RMF. We will touch briefly on the EU AI Act and other emerging governance models while discussing model inaccuracies such as drift, bias, and hallucination, and how leaders can choose the framework that best fits their risk, industry, and maturity. For those who are new to Tevora, we are a cybersecurity and compliance consultancy focused on supporting CISOs, risk managers, security leaders, risk teams across enterprises and mid-sized organizations. As AI becomes embedded into these business operations, Tevora is expanding that mission to help customers secure their AI journey with practical governance, defensible controls, and risk-aligned compliance framework. So today we'll be focusing on a few specific AI frameworks. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce my colleagues and three panelists that today will give you a brief introduction of themselves. And so, Anir, let's start with you, sir.
Perfect. Thank you, James, for the great intro there. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all. My name is Anir Desai. I'm a director here at Tevora. I primarily oversee our strategic services tower here at Tevora, which includes some of the AI services that Tevora has been providing to our clients: AI governance, AI risk, and specifically around NIST AI RMF. I've been at Tevora for about 8.5 years now. Been in the consulting space for more than about 10 years. Started my career off at Booz Allen and then moved over to Tevora. So been in the cybersecurity space for quite some time, dabbled in PCI compliance and all that good stuff. So excited to share our opinion and our visibility into the AI compliance space here. Yeah, I'll pass it to Jason.
Thank you, Anir. Jason?
Thanks, Anir. Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Lee. I've been at Tevora for over 9 years. I currently oversee the healthcare compliance practice at Tevora, specializing in HIPAA and HITRUST, including HITRUST AI. My previous experience includes PCI and ISO 27001. And I'll pass it over to Brandon.
Great. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, my name is Brandon Richardson, and I'm the senior manager for the ISO practice here at Tevora. We focus primarily on ISO 42001, 27001, and 22301, as well as some other ancillary ISO frameworks. I've been in the industry just over 10 years and have worked primarily in PCI and ISO. Back to you, James.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. As you can see, we have a great lineup of panelists here today, and I will be your host and moderator. And so just a couple of housekeeping items. So before we get started, please note that if you have any questions for our panelists or myself, you can either enter them into the Q&A box below, and we will do our best to respond. We do have some poll questions that we want to get out to you as well. And so we appreciate if you would answer those for us, and we will start with the first poll question. So let's go ahead and do the first poll question. And I won't read these out to you guys. I'll give you maybe about a minute or so to answer them. And we will pause here and I will get the questions ready for the panelists. Okay, we've still got some coming in. And perhaps for those of you that who can't fill out the poll questions, I will see that if we can maybe get those out to you after the webinar. Just a few more seconds here. Okay, great. We have completed the poll. Again, if you still need time to get those done, just let us know, or if you need them, we will be glad to send those out to you. So let's start with Anir. Anir, before we get into frameworks, why is this topic suddenly a board level issue, and where's the pressure coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great question. I'd say the simplest way I'd put it is AI has left the lab, right? For a couple of years, this was pilots and experiments for organizations, for individuals, in their private labs or whatever it could be, right? And the board didn't need to care. Now it's in the products, it's in the workflows, it's shaping customer-facing decisions. And the minute that happens, it stops being an IT project, right? I think from my perspective, the pressure is hitting from three sides and it's hitting all at once. The board is asking who owns this risk. Customers are asking via questionnaires for AI governance proof. And then, of course, the regulatory body comes shortly after, right? And I think all three are asking the same thing,
Hmm.
maybe in different ways. Can you prove your AI does what it says it does? I believe protecting this is easier said than done, right? The business wants to move fast, and not many leaders have the patience for slow, careful rollout, especially on a technology at this point in time that almost nobody understands just yet.
That's an excellent answer. And some of the things that I've experienced in working with boards of directors, most of them are concerned with, monetization of AI, moving AI forward in the business, but at the same time reducing the expense base in the organization. So we're definitely seeing that, in addition to who owns the risk, how do you defend it, how do you audit it, the board levels. I'm now seeing board of directors and other senior managers that are definitely getting involved and trying to make the best out of artificial intelligence. So I think as a collaborative source, we can definitely help our boards do better. So
Yeah.
let's see, Brandon. Let me go to you for a second. So if a customer or regulator asks an organization for proof today, what evidence would they show that AI is governed? What evidence would they show that it's secure and is working as intended?
Yeah, and that's a great question that we get a lot, actually, is how do I demonstrate that I'm doing things right? I'd say the most straightforward answer is if you've got something like an ISO 42001 cert, right, for your AIMS in
Hmm.
place, that's a pretty good way to demonstrate that you're at least taking into consideration things like ethics, impact, security, technology when it comes to AI usage and development. Um, Without those, as Anir said, and as we saw in the poll, right, the governance question usually comes back to things like third-party questionnaires,
Yeah.
demonstration of things like policies and documentation. And that can be a bit more cumbersome, but we are seeing for those that aren't certified, they still have to have a path to demonstrate that level of like governance and care and control effectiveness.
Perfect. So where do you see the organizations when miss the connection between AI governance, security, and business resilience? So where are you seeing the missing those control points there?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times it comes from the lens that the initiative comes from. If it comes from the security side, they think about applying security controls, not so much, establishing governance. And there are frameworks that are, more control heavy, as we'll see later, and there are some that are more governance centric. But the biggest misses that we see are often either looking too programmatic at the high level side, or diving too far down into the control level side and focusing only on the technologies themselves.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So again, I want to remind you, if you have any questions, please put those in the Q&A section of the webinar. And let's dive into a little bit of healthcare at this point. So, according to a 2025 report, by the Becker's Hospital Review, 88 it says that 88% of healthcare organizations are deploying AI, but only 17% of them have good AI governance. So, Jason, for you, I mean, where should healthcare leaders start when they need to protect their EPHIs and or manage patient privacy or AI risk? And how do they still enable responsible AI innovation with this such low number of organizations that are actually in AI governance?
Thanks, James. That Becker stat perfectly highlights the reality we're seeing right now. The adoption of AI is drastically outpacing the governance of it. If you're a healthcare leader, you have to start with visibility. You can't protect EPHI if you don't know where it's flowing. The very first step we recommend is conducting a targeted AI inventory to separate clinical workflows from administrative ones. For example, are your team using AI to summarize patient notes, which carry a massive EPHI risk, or are they just drafting marketing emails or just internal non-sensitive information? Once you map those use cases, you can build a safe sandbox. You don't want to stifle innovation by just saying no to AI. You enable it by providing sanctioned enterprise-grade AI tools where BAAs and other contracts are in place with the vendors and data retention policies are enforced. The goal is to bring shadow AI into light.
Yeah, I think that's important, especially as you look at the Becker's research or the benchmark of 17%. I recently did a project for a healthcare organization that was doing clinical research. And I'm not going to call the name of the organization, but there was very little governance in the process. And you have to look at things like we're dealing with clinical research, we're dealing with patients' lives and things like that. So it's important that we have good AI governance because we just can't trust all the AI models and the agents that are out there. So we really have to make sure that we protect patients, not only their privacy, but also in a sense their lives. So it's important to look at AI governance and improve. We have to improve those percentages of AI governance versus AI strategies. So let's see. Thanks, Jason. I appreciate that. So now let's go to another poll question. Let's see. We'll go to another poll question here. I wish I had prizes to give you guys for poll questions, but and we're also going to be providing these responses back as well. So hopefully we have your contact information and we can get those back out to you after the webinar. Just about another 60 or so seconds. Again, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A session, and we have that poll actually completed. And so, great. Let's see, about 50% of you you're gaining that visibility. That's perfect. Yeah. And so I think 52% of you are saying you're aligning AI governance with cybersecurity and privacy. And I think one of the things that we see as a lower percentage for the group is producing audit ready evidence that AI secure, governed, and compliant. So, and that's what do you think, guys? To the panel, right? Are we seeing that as what we with our clients today? I believe that that's consistent with what we're seeing with clients. Is that
Yeah,
collaboration between AI and security and governance?
absolutely. I see the highest response was balancing AI innovation, control, oversight, and regulatory exposure, which was exactly where this webinar kind of lives, right? How do you balance that at the speed of where things are going and how we're all going in this AI world of things? So, yeah.
Yeah. That's perfect. And
Yeah.
I think once we get to throughout the webinar, you'll see that, having those frameworks would definitely help. And I'm very hopeful that, having a good framework in place and managing that framework is obviously going to help increase some of those numbers overall as well. So back to you, Anir. Let's go back to the question.
Sure.
So as AI moves from experiments into production, what does the organization need to prove first?
Okay. I say the first thing you have to prove is control. Not that AI is perfect and the AI that you've deployed within your organization is perfect, but that you know where it's running. I think what it can touch, what it can do on its own at this point in time, I think most organizations can't answer that just yet. Everything
Yes.
else, like the bias testing, the audit evidence, like we saw from the poll, the certifications, all of that kind of sits on top of that, right? If you can't say where AI is allowed to act, and who authorized it, you don't have a governance program, you have a policy, right?
Yeah.
Where I tell people to start is the AI RMF, right? As you can see, even on this slide, right? Using the AI RMF, the generative AI profile, and 800 218A for secure AI development for all of those that are developing their own models and whatnot. That's enough to put structure and basic guardrails up without turning every AI project into a year-long governance exercise, right? With this day and age, with the limited resources and the time commitments that we as leaders have to put forward, I think having something that doesn't eliminate mistakes, right? It makes smaller ones, recoverable ones, right? Instead of single decision that exposes the whole company, right? I think in healthcare it's the same idea, right? But the stakes
Right.
are higher and they're sharper because you have to prove control over that data. Will EPHI touch AI, right? Or has the vendor sent it anywhere you haven't accounted for yet, right? So I know our poll had several different objectives and whatnot, but I don't think it stops there. There's a far ever evolving structure and whatnot that folks are going to see here as things kind of move as quickly as they are.
Yeah, one of the things I've experienced is federal agencies, as they, grapple with the requirement that every agency must have a chief AI officer or someone overseeing AI from a strategy and governance perspective. But
Yeah.
I see that very heavily, not only just in healthcare, but also in federal government and also state and local government. But kind of scaling it into more around governance and management of their AI systems. How do organizations prove that the risks are managed, right? You mentioned AI RMF, which is great, right? So,
Yeah.
but how do these organizations not only prove that they have a risk management framework, but their program is governed, right? Or their systems are secure. So, what are your thoughts there, Anir?
I think leaning on a framework is great, right? If you have baselines or the foundation in place, then proving things becomes a little bit easier, right? But I think it depends on who's asking, right? Are your
Yep, that's
customers
correct.
asking? Is your board is the ask internal, right? Or is it external facing? I think at that point in time, you can pick and choose what's relevant, but also what's achievable, right? If you're not a healthcare organization, right? there's no point in chasing high trust, right? For
That's right.
example.
Exactly.
But if you want to use ISO, right, like here in this slide, we show that the program proof, right? Build your program. If you're proving your program, ISO is great, right? There's other frameworks that are also emerging. I know we're going to talk about those today as well, that are layering on top of these frameworks, right?
Sure.
I think OWASP like layered on top of HITRUST AI. I know Jason's going to talk about that. We have the AIUC that's layering on top of, or not, if not adjacent to 42001, specific to agentic workflows. So I think if you build the foundation correctly, lean on what you have, right? Don't recreate the wheel. I think proving will become a lot easier as the demands change. And you'll find yourself in a proactive seat rather than a reactive seat.
Absolutely. It's all about proactivity.
Yeah,
And so I think that's what makes the organizations collaborate and also build good, effective, and safe AI systems. So,
exactly.
uh, Jason, how should healthcare organizations avoid choosing a framework based on popularity, right? I mean, I like NIST AI RMF. Why? Because it's cool, right? Or maybe I was a contributor to the writing, so I'm going to use it, but it doesn't have anything to do with my organization. So how do they choose a framework that's not based on popularity, but instead choosing one that actually meet their needs, right? And obviously going to help protect patient healthcare information.
Now, you made a good point earlier about proving control. In healthcare, your threat model is very different because patient safety and HIPAA data is on the line. You can't just pick and choose a framework because it looks good on a slide deck, for example. You avoid the popularity contest by looking at what natively integrates with your existing compliance statute. If your primary risk is exposing patient data to an external LLM, for example, you need a framework that explicitly addresses data minimization, anonymization, and vendor risk management. You want a framework that gives you prescriptive controls for protecting EPHI rather than just high-level programmatic guidance.
Awesome response. And so obviously the attendees are loving it as well, because if I look at the attendee list, we're still at our maximum list here. So we must be talking about some good stuff here, guys. So I love it. So thanks for the attendees that have joined, and keep that number up and keep those questions coming in. We have a great set of panelists here that can answer your questions. So let's look at the side-by-side comparisons, right, on slide 6 here. So, Mr. Brandon, so even when a customer does not need a formal certification, is it practical for them to use a certifiable framework like ISO 43001 or HITRUST? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, absolutely. As we kind of mentioned earlier with the governance model, right? It's a good idea to implement any strong governance system to manage your AI technologies and to kind of keep track of your different approaches to things like risk management, continual improvement. And so using any framework, whether it's NIST, ISO, or HITRUST or another one, is a good idea, particularly if you're just getting into the space and you're going to be developing things like policies and documentation.
Sure.
Might as well build that with the framework in mind. Then you don't have to go back later and overhaul your program if you do decide to go get compliance. And as well with 42001, if there isn't a push from like your customers or your partners or your regulators, you can still implement that
Sure.
aims and then use it as kind of a demonstration to whichever interested party you're working with, that you are taking into consideration, the governance model inside for 2001, even if you don't get that certificate.
Awesome. I noticed that many of these frameworks, they are pretty consistent with their objectives and control points or suggested control activities. And obviously the NIST AI RMF is real good at, adopting some of the risk management taxonomies and a lot of the risk management frameworks out there. So, Jason, does it make sense for a healthcare organization to use NIST AI RMF or either ISO 42001? What are you seeing with our healthcare customers? Are they looking that way?
So as kind of what Brandon mentioned just earlier, it does make sense for healthcare companies to use, NIST AI RMF or ISO 42001. They're fantastic frameworks for standardizing how your board and your executive team talk about AI risk. For example, ISO 42001 gives you the internationally recognized certifiable management system. However, if you are a healthcare company, you still have to bridge those frameworks to HIPAA and clinical safety. So while ISO and NIST gives you some overarching structure and some frameworks, you still need to lean highly on the HITRUST AI to do the heavy lifting.
Perfect.
HITRUST, what it does is it gives you the specific prescriptive controls for the EPHI that the broader frameworks might leave open to interpretation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great answer. I appreciate that, sir. So, Anir, question for you and Brandon here. The first part I'll ask to you. I'll ask it to you, Anir. For organizations out there that are in these categories, right? What usually drive the framework of choice first?
Um, Picking one first, I'd say in practice, in almost nobody, or at least I hope nobody picks a framework because they sat down and read all three or read all four, right? It's driven mostly by who is applying the pressure. I think that's the best way to put it. If it's your customers and if it's showing up in your deals and questionnaires, then it's easy, right? You can go to ISO 42001 because that's the one they also recognize. And similarly, they're probably asking the same with other vendors or customers or whomever that they're working with, right? And if you're in healthcare and you're handling PHI, high trust is the path of least resistance because you're probably already in it. And if it's your board, your own risk team driving it, your risk committees and AI governance committees and whatnot, then it's easy to start with AI RMF, right? Because it's the
Yep.
language they speak. And that's the important part, right? You have to resonate with the folks that are asking of it or your audience and whatnot. So the honest answer, I think, the frameworks gets chosen for you in a way, depending on who's applying the pressure and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I've seen business to business B2B pressure, in addition to regulatory exposure drive framework adoption. Obviously, most customers, your clients are going to get, you need to have that assurance, right? Or that reverse TPRM, as some call it. But they're going to be wanting to make sure that your AI adoption is equally as secure as theirs or better. And so,
Exactly.
Brandon, what about internal governance maturity? Are there other driving forces that we're seeing in our customer base?
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea that an organization would stand up and just decide, hey, I think it's a good idea for us to do this. Obviously, that's kind of the perfect model, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But as Anir said, there is this driving force from the outside where we see regulators or sales, or partnerships being kind of the driving factor most of the time for adoption, particularly for things that require certification. However, we are seeing a lot of organizations looking at frameworks like 42001
Hmm.
um, to start kind of implementing a governance model, right? And as you said, kind of that internal pressure for, well, we need to do something. And so where do we start? So we're kind of seeing a lot of adoption around there. And then I think the last driving factor is kind of the recognition, right? So
Sure.
if we go down this path, kind of what does it get us and what can we show for it? And so a lot of times organizations that are seeking to have something at the end of the tunnel is, do we go the ISO path? Because if we go the ISO path, we can maintain a certificate, kind of have something to demonstrate. So it's not just our own internal pressures or these external pressures, but it's like something achievable at the end of the day.
Yeah,
Perfect. Thank you,
it's huge.
Brandon. There's a new layer of frameworks as we go to slide 7 here. A new layer of frameworks. We obviously see other frameworks emerging, like the AIUC1 and others. And so Brandon, back to you, sir. What should leaders do today while their organization are looking at agent-specific standards and laws that are still emerging? Should they wait for clarity or should just build on the framework and keep moving and adapt frameworks as they come in and kind of look at a unified AI compliance model, things like this? So what are we seeing out there?
Yeah. If you interact with AI in any substantial way at this point in time, there's no reason to not get started, right? You're going to have some part of your organization that either wants to be following a good model needs to be in order to meet some kind of regulatory or industry requirement, or just, for marketing capacity, whatever it might be, right? You need to kind of have these tools on hand. So definitely, if you haven't started already, I would recommend getting started. And if you have started and you're kind of deciding down what path to choose,
Yep,
there's no wrong answer to get started. I think NIST is a great place to start. Take the risk-based approach, take the high-level approach, implement that. And then if down the road you decide, okay, let's put in, 42,001, let's build a whole AIMS. You've kind
hmm
of got a good structure in place. And the foundations of these frameworks, even if they don't stay exactly the same, or even if you end up deciding on a different framework later on, the foundations that are built within these frameworks are
absolutely.
the gold standard across the industry, and will be continue to be used as the advancements in technologies continue and as new frameworks come out. And we've seen that with ISO 27001. It
Yep,
didn't go anywhere. It's still around, and it's still the
yep.
gold standard for um, you know countries that determine their security regulations, and industries that determine their regulations. And yeah, so definitely get started, get taking a look, and there's no harm with digging into a good framework here.
Very nice and adequately put. So let's go to slide 8. Let's do a time check. We're about 10:35 a.m. So we've got about another 10 minutes or so for questions. So we're going to just kind of, move a little faster for the audience so we give them an opportunity to do Q&A. So let's start with Jason. For healthcare organizations, when they move beyond AI policy and start asking for evidence, where does HITRUST help them? HITRUST AI help them?
So a policy is really just a piece of paper with good intentions until you back it up with evidence. This is where HITRUST AI shines because it demands prescriptive, testable controls. Um, with the HITRUST AI security assessment, there's actual controls in there to ask for, evidence of, do you have logs for your your AI usage, things like that. It's very different from some of the other frameworks because instead of talking about having just a foundation, it actually asks for security controls built around the use of AI.
Yep, that's a perfect answer. So we've got a question that came in that says, "What are the best ways to keep up with AI? Seems like it changes every week." Obviously, that's a great answer because as these frontier models and these hyperscalers, as they continue to make the reasoning processes better with them, and obviously get more intelligence as intelligence sources for these models that are out there. Because obviously, when you look at Gen AI and you start looking at agentic AI, they're depending on these frontier models to give them the reasoning capabilities. And so, if you look at things like contextual engineering and so on and so forth, the models have to keep up with these demands. So it's really customers are demanding it because they're commanding relevancy, they're commanding accuracy. The models have to really jump into reasoning. And then there's that internal, or that I would call it the industry competition wars, right? And so right now, Anthropic Claude is deemed to be the best coding model out there. I'm not sure, but they've got some, ChatGPT's got some reasoning that's better. So we're seeing this competitive battlefield as well. But overall, I think that, it is changing every week. I agree with you. But we have to continue to push on the frontier models, push on the hyperscalers to be able to create an AI infrastructure that's going to benefit our organization, give us a bit more trust in the process. And so as these agents start running decisions and making decisions, we have to have that accuracy. We have to have that trust in those agents. And so we're going to continue to see the market move faster. But I think the year 2027, we should see some slowing down, if you will. But expect to see some things like autonomy, right? That's going to be more important as we go forward. So I think we just have to continue to roll with the program and make sure that we continue to get out of these frontier models what we need out of for our business. And so that's an important thing. Second question came in and says, how do we decide whether AI governance should be owned by security, compliance, legal, IT, or a dedicated AI governance team? I'm going to let the panel answer that one, right? Because I'm pretty biased to it, so I'm going to let the panel answer because I have my own biasness. But panel, if one of you guys want to take that, or all of you guys jump in.
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, from ISO's perspective, there should be a defined set of individuals that make up kind of your executive committee. The ownership there doesn't say, oh, it has to go to this team. But functionally, you're kind of creating your own AI governance body. And a lot of times, instead of saying it should be one place or another, it's kind of the opposite. It should be everywhere because it is everywhere. So pick one member from your IT, pick one member from your security, pick one member from your executive suite and put them on that committee. And then true ownership of things like documentation, that's where you can start saying things like, okay, well, this team owns the documents, this team owns these controls, and all that being mapped in like your SOA or a similar document where you're really understanding not only what kind of governance model and controls are in place, but also who that's impacting and who's going to own the different pieces of it. So, not a clear answer, I know, but
Yep.
probably from ISO's perspective, you're not going to get a straightforward right answer there.
Okay, perfect. Thank
Yeah.
you, sir.
Any or
All right.
Jason, did you have
Yeah.
any?
Yeah, I'll jump in here quickly. It's dependent on the ownership aspect, right? I think that's where if where AI risk is kind of created, who can enforce the controls and who's the accountable party internally. I think Brandon's right. Like picking individuals from existing team would help you map your existing structure as you kind of evolve, right? I don't think it's necessarily right to recreate the wheel and create a whole entire different team with new individuals that have their own processes and all that stuff. Take what you already have, because we've done this before, right? When we built risk management programs from scratch, right? I think we've done some of those components. You can really take those components as you kind of evolve and build new programs.
Perfect. Let's see, time check here. I'm going to ask my panelists to let's kind of speed up a little bit because we have a few more slides we want to go through. So we're going to just kind of condense our answers a little bit. So as we look at, slide number, let's see, we're on slide number 8 or 9 here. Let's look at slide number 9. And so, we've got these where do I start question, right? So when you look at the frameworks and where do we start? So Anir, I'll just go to you kind of off the cusp here. I mean, where should organizations start within their process? How do they start from governance? What is from step one to step 10, right? How do they get started? And what's some of the things they need to do?
So exactly what we've kind of said previously, right? It depends on who is asking and where the pressure is coming from. I think the common mistakes that we see folks make is building their governance program around the rules and the regulations and whatnot. So every time a new law or a framework gets updated, they think they have to kind of reconfigure, right? And that's exhausting
Correct.
and very resource and time consuming, as we all four of us know, right? Build around your own risk, not around the regulation. Then the new rule becomes a delta, right? I think that's the best way to kind of go about it.
Awesome. Let's quickly go to poll question number 3. So if we can get that poll question up for the attendees. Perfect. This is a short one, so we can get this one done fairly quickly. A few more seconds here. Perfect. Let's see. 39%. No, our organization prioritizes innovation over security. So it looks like we've got some work to do there in the industry from our attendees. And so we'll get these poll questions up to you as well. So let's look at the 5 steps that you can take, right? And so I'm going to start with Jason first. For healthcare leaders, that what practical for health these healthcare executives and leaders, what practical move this quarter should most take to reduce AI risk before it touches patients' data or clinical trials or either care delivery?
The simplest thing you can, start out with is, and it's the most practical one is create an acceptable use policy based on, an AI acceptable use policy. Make sure all users are aware of the policy, that they acknowledge to it, they read it, they're trained on it, and then start tying technical controls around it. So if your acceptable use policy states that you can only use certain LLMs, make sure you're monitoring those, and maybe allow listing or blocking some of the ones that are not allowed to be used.
Great answer. So let's go to slide 7. Let's look ahead here. A couple things, and I'll take this one myself here. IDC, along with Microsoft, pushed out an announcement that by 2028, 1.3 billion agents are going to be in the enterprise. And so many of these agents are making decisions, they're performing workflows and tasks. And so one of the things that we're seeing is that with these agents, as they're making these decisions, we need to look at, kind of merge in our AI governance strategy to not to look at just, the mere controls and the security aspects of it, but what are those agents doing, right? Are they making decisions? If they're making decisions, can we trust those decisions? And so, where's our assurance in what those agents are doing? The other thing is, how do we know what agents are in our third-party applications? And so it's important as we look at these agents to look at some of the following things, right? One is agent identity. Can I, create an agent identity that's equivalent or comparable to a human identity? And how do I manage that? And so it's important to make sure you treat those agents similar to what you would treat a human worker as well. And so give it an identity, manage its access, understand what it's doing, monitor its activities at all costs, right? And ensure that you can trust the decisions. And if some of these agents are talking back to a frontier model, then you want to make sure that the model is actually accurate as well. Because we know models hallucinate, they drift, and they go bias, and they do lots of other things. But for the answer to that is obviously to have a bit more contextual engineering done, and we're starting to see a lot of things around skills.emd files that are coming up that are helping organizations keep their agents running in a relevant fashion. So these are some of the things that we would encourage the audience to look for. And something that here at Tevora we're doing very well, and we can help you with that, is to ensure that your agents are secure, their identities, we know what they have access to, so on and so forth. And so that's one of the things that you look at, because 1.3 billion agents hitting the enterprise, that's a scary number. But obviously we have to manage that. It's where we're going to be. And so it's a dose of reality. And so what I would suggest is to ensure that you have you roll your security agents. The agents roll that into your security infrastructure, and also your security controls and policies, procedures, and standards. And I think you'll be fairly well. So let's see. One more final poll question, and then we've got another one question, and I think we're going to be done. But again, let's go to another poll question. Okay, and while we're waiting on the poll results to come back here, okay, perfect. While we're waiting on those poll results to come back, for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and fire off the next question to Anir. And let's see, Anir. So, how should CISOs and GRC leaders bring AI risk into the controls they already trust without creating another isolated governance program?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think out of the topics here, this is probably the one I care about the most, right? The goal is to make AI governance operational, right? Not another binder, right? You don't want
Yes.
internal teams doing that. You don't want external consultancies doing that for you either. The AI specific risks bias, drift, prompt injection, data exposure, you name it, need to land in the same risk register and control set your executives already use for cyber and enterprise risk. Now that's a big statement, harder to do, easier said than done, right? It's a convergence, not a new program. That's a simple way to put it. The hard part is the plumbing, right? Mapping those AI risks into your existing 853 or CSF
Yeah.
controls, getting security and GRC working off of one evidence base instead of building their own, right? But that mapping is the work. And it's what keeps you from ending up with a second disconnected governance program that nobody necessarily maintains, right?
Sure,
I think
sure.
James, you and I, we've been advising clients, right, taking your existing control stacks, and I think one of the questions that we get is, look, I have controls, I have the traditional security controls, I have change management, I have et
Yes.
cetera, right? But now, how do I evolve those controls to meet AI, right? Because those are different. It's the same game, but it's a different ball, should you please, right? So I think using some of those layers to build upon each other, AI controls matrix, right? Having some of the common crosswalk mapping and using those to your advantage really will help you not create another isolated governance program.
Awesome. Thank you. And let's see, I think that was the final question. We're still waiting on the poll to come in. But I mean, I want to thank the audience for joining us today. I think we've kept a 90%, attendee list, so that's great. Let's see. So, AI is moving quite fast, guys. And the answer is not to just stand still. One of the questions came back is how do we roll with the ever-changing AI models, right? And AI systems. The opportunity here for us is to help for us as Tevora. We want to help our clients embrace AI with that confidence by building security, governance, and trust into your journeys from day one. Right? This is where we're focused. We're helping our customers move forward securely with AI, their programs, their controls, that making sure that they can defend them and they're defensible and auditable, right? And most importantly, they are business aligned. So I want to thank our great panelists for joining us today as well for their insights. There's a quickly changing area and one that we receive a lot of interest in. This is a quickly changing area for us. And so we have the latest poll results out to you guys as well. And so we're after today, you will be, able to access the recording of this webinar on our YouTube page. And if you want to download our definitive AI security program guide, go to the link shown on your screen. As always, reach out to us if you have more questions or if you want to get one of our sales account managers to contact you guys. Please do so as well. And so we're here to help you support your AI security governance and compliance needs. And visit Tevora.com. Thank you for your help and thank you for joining us
James,
on today's call.
James, before we end, I just want to thank a few people that I see on our attendees list. I see a lot of our clients on here, which
Perfect.
is great. So if you're a Tevora client or if you're new to Tevora too, thank you guys for taking the time and listening to us and listening to our perspective on things and whatnot. And I see repeated folks that have joined our webinars before too. So thank you guys. We definitely appreciate it. And I think for us as panelists, I think this is great confirmation, right? That things that we're talking about are relevant, important, and top of mind for folks.
Yep, agree, concur. Thanks, guys.
Thank you all.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.